You think that waterfront villa deal was yours to claim? I had the client in my pocket long before you put together that pretty little presentation. The commission is mine, and HR has already approved it. Don't push your luck. If you keep making noise about this, Olivia, you'll find out just how replaceable you are around here. Some people know how to play the game, and some don't. Hi, my name is Olivia Hayes. I am 28 years old. The words landed in the glass conference room like a door slamming shut. Richard Hale sat at the head of the long table, sunlight from the bay glinting off his watch as he leaned back with that practiced half smile. The deal I had nursed for 6 weeks, the one with the buyer who specifically asked for me after our last closing, was suddenly his. Linda Shaw from HR sat 2 seats down, nodding like this was the most ordinary thing in the world. The rest of the team kept their eyes on their laptops. I felt the floor tilt under my chair. My notes, my emails, my late-night spreadsheets were all right there in the shared drive. I had the client's direct messages thanking me by name. None of it seemed to matter. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk on the 12th floor and opened the file anyway. Every line of communication traced back to me. The initial inquiry had come through my contact form. The buyer had said in the first call that he wanted to work with the person who had handled his cousin's property 2 years earlier. That person was me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled every bonus statement and tax form from the last 18 months. The numbers did not line up. Deals I had closed showed smaller payouts than the internal logs suggested, and one large bonus had simply vanished from my records. I cross-checked the dates against the company calendar. The pattern was quiet but consistent. The next morning, I ran into Mark Sullivan near the coffee station. He was the only person in finance who ever spoke to me like I was not invisible. "Rough meeting yesterday," he said, keeping his voice low. "Heard Richard is taking the full commission on the villa. You all right with that?" I shrugged like it was nothing. "Just paperwork." Mark glanced over his shoulder. "Be careful who you ask about it." Last person who pushed on a similar thing ended up with a surprise performance review and a restructuring conversation. Linda usually signs off on those. I carried that warning back to my desk and let it sit. 2 days later, I made an appointment with Linda under the heading Routine Compensation Questions. Her office smelled like expensive hand lotion and printer toner. She listened to me lay out the emails and the client records without once looking at the papers I had printed. "Olivia Richard has been the face of these high-value transactions for years," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "It protects the firm's brand when senior leadership is visible. I'm sure you understand how these things work at this level." I asked her to look at the actual correspondence. She told me the decision was final and suggested I focus on my upcoming review instead. I left her office with my hands cold and my throat tight. That evening, I called my sister Chloe while I paced the small balcony of my apartment. She had been the one person I always called when work felt impossible. "Chloe, he stole the deal outright. HR is backing him like it's policy. I have the emails. What am I supposed to do?" She was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it's not worth burning the bridge. You're still early in your career. People remember the ones who make scenes. Just keep your head down and look for something better on the side." I hung up and stood there watching the lights on the water. The one person I thought would understand had already decided I should swallow it. 2 days later, I stayed late to finish a report and ran into Rebecca Lane in the parking garage. She had left the firm a few months earlier for a smaller boutique agency. We had always gotten along. "Rebecca," I said, "can I ask you something about the way deals get credited here?" She studied me for a second, then nodded toward her car. We sat with the doors closed and the engine off. "I left because I found the same thing you're finding now," she said. "Richard adjusts the sales logs after the fact. Linda helps clean up the paperwork so it looks clean for bonuses and taxes. I kept copies of a few things before I walked. If you ever need them, ask." She gave me her number and told me to be careful who I trusted inside the building. When I got home, I plugged the small USB she had handed me into my laptop. The files showed a longer pattern than I had guessed, 3 other deals where the originating associate's name had been swapped after closing. I now had the tax discrepancy sitting in my own records, the chain of emails I had saved myself and Rebecca's older files showing the same method used before. The picture was getting clearer and colder. The next morning, I tried to open the shared drive for an older client folder I needed for reference. A red error box appeared, access restricted. I called IT. They said it was part of a routine security sweep and would be restored soon. I asked when. They said they would get back to me. I sat at my desk staring at the message. The knot in my stomach had turned into something sharper. I scheduled a call with Daniel Brooks, the real estate attorney I had worked with on a previous transaction. I did not tell anyone at the office where I was going. That afternoon, I walked out of the building with my laptop bag over my shoulder and my phone on silent. I did not know yet what I was going to do with everything I had collected. I only knew I was done pretending the numbers and the names did not matter. Have you ever watched someone take credit for the work you stayed up nights to finish? Then watch the people who are supposed to protect you nod along like it was normal. Tell me your limit. What would finally make you stop being the person who stays quiet? The morning after I walked out of the building with my laptop bag over my shoulder and my phone on silent, I sat across from Daniel Brooks in his quiet office 2 blocks from the water. He had handled the closing paperwork on a previous villa sale for one of my clients, so he already knew the firm's reputation for moving fast and keeping things tidy on paper. I laid out the tax forms, showing the missing bonus the chain of client emails that never mentioned Richard Hale until after the deal was done and the files Rebecca Lane had given me from her own time at the company. Daniel read through everything without rushing. When he finished, he leaned back and tapped one finger on the edge of the folder. This isn't just one stolen commission, Olivia. The pattern across these files suggests systematic adjustment of sales records. If the tax reporting was altered to match that, moves into territory the IRS and the State Real Estate Commission would both care about. You have enough here to file an internal complaint that forces an audit or to go outside if they retaliate, but you need to decide how far you're willing to take it before you make the next move. I left his office with a list of next steps written in his neat handwriting. Pull my own complete 1099 history, get a written confirmation from the buyer if possible, and document every conversation from that point forward. He told me not to discuss it with anyone inside the firm until I had more. The advice felt solid, but it also made the air in my car feel thinner on the drive back. By the time I reached my desk the next day, the restricted access message on the shared drive had spread to 2 more folders I needed for an active file. I called IT again. This time, the woman on the other end sounded rehearsed. We're running a security audit on all high-value transaction records. It should clear in a day or 2. I thanked her and hung up. 2 days later, the folders were still locked. I spent the lunch hour at my desk with the door cracked, scrolling through old calendar invites. Every time Richard had jumped in to help on a deal, I had originated the bonus split had shifted in his favor within 48 hours. The numbers were small enough at first that I had written them off as rounding or company policy. They added up now. That afternoon, I slipped out early and drove to a coffee shop near the water where I knew the buyer, Thomas Reed, sometimes worked on his laptop. I had his personal email from the deal paperwork. I sent a short message asking if he had a minute to confirm who he had dealt with on the financing side. I did not mention Richard or the commission. I just said I was updating my records and wanted to make sure everything matched on his end. The reply came 2 hours later while I was back at my desk, pretending to review a new inquiry. Thomas wrote that he had worked exclusively with me from the first call through closing, and that he had specifically requested me again for a second property he was considering. He even added that he had told Richard during the final walkthrough that he appreciated having a consistent point of contact. I saved the email to 3 different places and felt the first real flicker of something like relief. The relief lasted until the next morning. I arrived to find an email from Linda Shaw in my inbox time-stamped 7:42 a.m. The subject line was "Quick Sync on Team Dynamics." The body asked me to stop by her office at 10 o'clock. No explanation. I forwarded it to the folder I had started on my personal drive and walked over at the exact time. Linda was already seated when I stepped inside. Richard was in the chair beside her desk. He did not stand. He just looked at me with the same half-smile from the conference room. "Olivia, we've noticed some tension lately." Linda began, her voice smooth. "Richard mentioned you seemed upset after the villa update. We want to make sure you feel supported." Richard leaned forward. "You've done good work here, but this industry rewards people who understand how credit flows at the senior level. If you keep questioning decisions that are already settled, it starts to look like you don't trust the team. That kind of thing gets noticed in reviews." I kept my hands folded in my lap so he would not see them shake. The client confirmed he worked directly with me. The emails are in the system. Richard's smile thinned. Emails can be interpreted a lot of ways, and clients say what they think you want to hear. HR has the final call on how bonuses are allocated. I suggest you let this go before it affects how people see your judgment. Linda nodded once, like a period at the end of a sentence. "We're putting together a performance check-in for next month. It would be better for everyone if there were no distractions before then." I walked out of that office with my jaw locked so tight it ached. They had not raised their voices. They had not needed to. The message was clear. Drop it, or we will make your life smaller until you do. That evening, I called my sister Abigail. I had changed her name in my mind to match how distant she already felt. She listened for 3 minutes before she said, "Olivia, maybe they're right. You're still building your book of business. If you fight them on this, you could end up blackballed in the whole coastal market. Just take the hit and move on." I ended the call without arguing. The person I used to vent to had become another voice telling me to stay quiet. 2 days later, I finally reached Jessica Morales in finance. She was the one who processed the bonus spreadsheets. I caught her at the end of the day when most of the floor had cleared out. She looked nervous when I asked about the Villa deal payout. "I can't talk about specific allocations," she said, eyes flicking toward the open door. "But I can tell you the final numbers that went to payroll didn't match the deal log I saw the week before closing. Someone changed the originating associate field after I ran the first report. I flagged it and got told to rerun it with the updated name." She paused, then added in a lower voice, "This isn't the first time I've seen that happen. I started keeping my own copies of the raw reports before they get adjusted. If you ever need them for something official, I have them." I thanked her and walked away before anyone could see us talking. Another piece had clicked into place. Jessica was not loud about it, but she had just handed me another thread. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again and opened the folder on my personal drive. The tax discrepancy, the client confirmation, Rebecca's old files, Jessica's raw reports, and the recording I had made of the conversation with Richard and Linda the day before. I had started recording meetings on my phone after Daniel told me to document everything. The audio was clear enough. I was still staring at the screen when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The message was short. "Stop digging. Some files are easier to lose than others." A friend, I read it twice, then I checked the call log from the office line I had used to contact Thomas Reed. The number had been dialed from my desk at 2:17 p.m., the day I sent the email. Someone had been watching the outgoing calls. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The list Daniel had given me was still in my bag. I had most of what he asked for now. The only question left was whether I was going to use it. The next morning I arrived to find my calendar had a new entry added without my permission. 9 a.m. Mandatory sync with R. Hale, L. Shaw, and B. Kessler, Conference Room C. Brian Kessler was the managing director who rarely came down from the top floor. The meeting was set for the following day. I did not reply to the invite. I opened a new document on my personal drive and started typing out exactly what I planned to say when I walked into that room. I did not know yet if I would actually go through with it, but the words were there, and for the first time, they did not feel like something I would delete before anyone saw them. The morning of the meeting, I printed the cleanest copies of everything one last time and slid the folder into my bag beside the small recorder I had used in Linda's office. I wore the same blazer I had worn the day Richard first claimed the Villa deal. It felt like armor now instead of just fabric. I arrived at Conference Room C at 8:55. Brian Kessler was already seated at the head of the table. Richard and Linda sat on one side. Karen Ellis from the junior team and Michael Lang from another deal team had been added to the calendar invite without explanation. Jessica Morales stood near the door with a stack of printed spreadsheets in her hands. She gave me the smallest nod before she sat. Brian looked up from his phone. "Olivia, thank you for coming. We wanted to clear the air on a few things before they turn into larger issues." Richard started first, the same half smile in place. "We've all been under pressure with the new developments along the water. Sometimes people misread how credit is shared on big transactions. I think we can all agree it's better to move forward as a team." Linda picked up the thread without missing a beat. "Your recent questions have created some confusion in the records department. We'd like to understand what you're hoping to achieve before this affects your standing." I opened the folder on the table and slid the first page across to Brian. It was the tax discrepancy summary I had pulled with Daniel's help. This shows the bonus that was reported for the Villa deal and the one that actually hit my forms. They do not match. The client, Thomas Reed, confirmed in writing that he worked exclusively with me from the first inquiry through closing. I have that email as well. Richard's smile tightened. "Clients say flattering things when they want favors later. That doesn't change how the firm allocates internal credit." I played the recording from my phone. Richard's voice filled the room, clear and cold. "Emails can be interpreted a lot of ways, and clients say what they think you want to hear. HR has the final call on how bonuses are allocated. I suggest you let this go before it affects how people see your judgment." The room went still. Brian's expression changed from neutral to something sharper. He looked at Linda. "You signed off on this allocation knowing the originating associate field had been changed after the fact." Linda's voice stayed even, but her hands had gone still on the table. "We follow the process that protects the firm's brand on high-value deals." Richard has the relationships. That's how these things have always worked. Jessica Morales spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but steady. I ran the raw reports before any changes were made. The original associate name was Olivia's on 3 separate deals in the last year. I kept copies because I was told to rerun them with different names. I have those files here if anyone wants to see the timestamps. Michael Lang shifted in his chair. The same thing happened on the Henderson property last spring. I was told it was a team adjustment. I let it go because I needed the job. I shouldn't have. Karen Ellis added, 3 of us on the junior side have the same pattern in our files. We compared notes after hours because we were afraid to ask out loud. Richard stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. This is ridiculous. You're all listening to a disgruntled associate who can't accept that not every deal belongs to her. I built half the relationships in this firm before most of you were hired. If you think some printed emails and a couple of upset juniors are going to change that, you're mistaken. His voice cracked on the last word. He sat back down harder than he meant to. For the first time, the half-smile was gone. His face had gone pale under the conference room lights. He looked at Brian and then at the papers spread across the table like they might disappear if he stared hard enough. Brian closed the folder slowly. Richard, I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct a full review of every transaction you touched in the last 24 months. Linda, you will step back from all compensation decisions until the same review is complete. Olivia, you will receive the full commission on the villa deal, plus any adjusted amounts from the other transactions that were changed. The firm will cover any tax implications on your end. We will also cover reasonable legal costs if you choose to pursue this further outside the company. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. His shoulders dropped. He stared at the table for a long moment before he spoke again, voice low and uneven. I have a family to support. This firm is all I have. You can't just Brian cut him off without raising his voice. You made the choice to alter records and pressure people who reported to you. The consequences are yours now. Richard pushed his chair back and walked out. He did not look at any of us. Linda followed a minute later, her face blank. The door clicked shut behind them. Brian turned to me. You should have come to me sooner. I'm sorry you had to build the case yourself. If you want to stay, there's a senior role opening in the new waterfront division. If you want to leave, we'll give you a clean reference and a separation package that reflects what you were owed. Either way, the choice is yours. I sat there for a moment, letting the words settle. The knot that had lived in my chest for weeks finally loosened. I chose to stay long enough to close out my files and train the person who would take over my current deals. I took the senior role offer because I had earned it. The commission on the villa deal hit my account the following week, along with back payments for the other adjusted transactions. It was enough to clear the last of my student loans and put a real down payment on a small place of my own farther up the coast. Abigail called 3 days after the meeting. She had heard through someone at the firm that Richard was gone. You really did it, she said. Her voice was tight. I hope you're happy. Frank Delaney is furious. He's the one who got you the interview there in the first place. He says you made the whole family look bad by dragging this into the open. I listened to her finish. Then I said, I'm done explaining myself to people who only call when they want me to stay quiet. Don't call again. I hung up before she could answer. Frank Delaney sent one text the next day asking me to think about the bigger picture. I blocked his number. That was the last family connection I cut. It hurt for a while, but the quiet that came after felt cleaner than any Sunday dinner or forced apology ever had. Rebecca Lane reached out a week later. She had started her own small buyer advisory service for waterfront properties. We met for coffee, and she offered to bring me on as a partner if I ever wanted to leave the corporate side. I told her I was staying for now, but I kept her number. Jessica Morales and Karen Ellis both stayed at the firm. Brian made sure their reviews reflected the truth of what they had stepped forward to say. Michael Lang transferred to a different division and sent me a short email thanking me for doing what none of us had done before. I still work in the same building, but the glass walls feel different now. I keep my own records of every deal. I still record important meetings when policy allows. The difference is that I no longer wonder whether my name will disappear from the paperwork overnight. When a client thanks me directly, I know the credit will stay where it belongs. The lesson I keep coming back to is simple. The people who take what you built will keep taking it as long as you let them rewrite the story. Sometimes, the people closest to you will ask you to let it happen, so the surface stays calm. I chose the truth instead of the calm. It cost me a couple of phone numbers and a few uncomfortable conversations, but it gave me back the work I had actually done and the right to keep doing it without looking over my shoulder. That trade was worth every quiet night that followed. Thank you for listening to my story. If someone in power tried to erase the work you stayed up nights to finish and then asked you to thank them for the opportunity, what would you do? Tell me your limit.